Welcome to this short notice live stream brought about because of the dramas after the race. I felt we needed to do a live stream before we got to Mexico, before it all went away, just to try to get to the bottom of what went on. I mean, just unbelievable, really. Lewis puts in one of his best drives of the year, finishes a very close second to Max. Max scoring his 50th Grand Prix win in front of the American fans. I mean, a circuit that Lewis has always loved, an occasion Lewis has always loved. And then some technical regulation and the car's disqualified. The Charles Leclerc Ferrari out as well, and that elevated Carlos Sainz into P3. So you can't imagine Ferrari feel that upset about it. But for Lewis, I mean, this was the best drive so far this year, and Mercedes looked very strong. And to have that taken away raises a lot of questions, and not the least of which have been Mercedes' politics over the last 12 months to do with bouncing and ride heights and wanting to enforce them in the belief that maybe some of the teams that are beating them have been doing something outside the regulations, shall we say. And the regulations got tighter and tighter, and here we are. So I think the first point that a lot of people are talking about, and I think there are quite a lot, I've been looking through some of the chat already coming on stream, is why only 4 cars were measured. And if that was the sample and 50% of those 4, in other words 2 of them, were illegal, why then didn't they take a larger sample to see how many other cars perhaps were illegal as well? Well, the reality is, of course, it comes down to the old thing of these are the rules, these are the regulations, and the rules are that they take, I mean, all the cars are weighed after the race, but everything else takes time. And so over the years, and it's been this for a long time now, they've had an arrangement where they do some tests at random, but basically one car from each of the 4 top teams in the race result gets measured for additional things, capacities, fluid capacities, floor and skid pads. And that's why they do it, because if they were to do the whole field, it would take hours and hours and hours, and they would never confirm the results, and it'd be a mess. So that they decided, it's been like this for a long time in Formula One. So although all the cars are weighed, never have we had a situation where all the cars are tested for things like the skid pad heights. And so that's why that was the case. And that's why it was the Ferrari and the Mercedes and not, say, I don't know, an AlphaTauri or a Haas Ferrari or something. That was that point. And then I think the next point is the explanation given by both Ferrari and Mercedes for how this could have happened. And both of them point to the complexity of the sprint format weekend, whereby the car goes into Parc Fermé after that first session on Friday, that all-important untimed practice on Friday. And you can't touch the car thereafter. And we saw Brazil last year. We saw Red Bull completely out to lunch with their ride heights. They never got it sorted. The circuit was nothing like as bumpy as they thought, and they didn't run low enough, basically, and they didn't have enough grip, and they couldn't get the tyres to work, and therefore they lost the race to Mercedes, to George Russell, as we all remember. So that's a good example of how a team right at the top can get it wrong just in that one session, if all their simulations are based on wrong data, if you like, as is the case with bumps. Now, you'd think 12 months on, everybody having watched what happened to Red Bull in Brazil, you would imagine that everybody is kind of on top of that now. A, and B, you would imagine that given all the stuff we've had about bouncing and controlling the ride heights and making sure the ride heights are legal and how often they are checked in the course of a weekend, you would imagine that everyone was on top of that as well. And I think that's what everybody felt watching that race, watching the weekend unfold in Austin. Obviously, it was bumpy, but it's not the first time we've had drivers since the last technical directive talking about bouncing and how difficult it was to drive the car. We get that virtually every race from some team in Friday practice. So it was nothing unusual there, and Austin's always been pretty bouncy, bumpy because of the extremes of weather in that part of Texas, obviously the winter and then the summer. And it's very tough going for the tarmac there. The straight, I mean, particularly the last phase of the straight, really bumpy. But it was also the curbs, and it was also the very high speeds through the change of direction S's in sector 1. And particularly early in the race, you might remember Lando Norris getting on the radio and saying, I had a massive moment there. What's going on? And they said, well, it's probably the wind, just avoid the curb, turn 9, I think it was. And it was a difficult part of the track, and that was doing quite a lot of damage. So that's all that. Then you get to why was it that those two teams got it wrong, Ferrari and Mercedes? Because you've got to assume that, well, we have assumed, and we must assume that the Red Bulls passed okay, because they would have checked either Perez or Verstappen, presumably Verstappen, and they would have checked Lando Norris as well. So no problems there. Those two cars were okay. And it's also significant, I think, that Valtteri Bottas said in the Alfa Romeo press release after the race, we weren't very good this weekend because of the bumps, because we had to raise the ride height much higher than we wanted to in order just to make sure we were legal at the end of the race. I mean, he put that out. I mean, from the minute that went out, there was no chance that there was going to be anything other than a disqualification for the Ferrari and the Merc. So why was it worse for them, and why did they make those mistakes? Well, everybody makes mistakes for a start, and of course all the things I've been talking about, it's the same for everybody. The complexity of the sprint weekend, it's the same for everybody. The bumps, the wind, everything else, the same for everybody. So no excuse in that area. But I would like to point out one thing that I think is significant in all of this, and that is the length of the stints, particularly the first stint, when the cars are full of fuel and at their heaviest and at their most prone to do damage to the skid pads. So stint 1 is a really important phase of the race, you could say, if you're going to be right on the edge of legality with the skid pads. Let's have a look at what happened in stint 1. Those numbers are the number of laps that the drivers did, various drivers did. I haven't included all of them there. People like Ocon and obviously Piastri didn't get very far, so irrelevant. But Charles Leclerc was on a one-stop strategy. Well, he was on a two-stop strategy, actually, when he went into stint 1. We'll get onto that in a bit. He was actually on a two-stop strategy, and they changed their minds halfway through the first stint, can you believe, at Ferrari, and decided to go to one stop. Anyway, putting that to one side, Charles Leclerc, 23 laps he did on his first set of tyres with that off the line with a heavy load of fuel. Daniel Ricciardo, also on a one-stop strategy, 22 laps. Lewis Hamilton, they kept him out for a long time, 20 laps, even though he's on a two-stop strategy, and that was to try to get this offset when he'd been in good shape at the end of the race on the medium, because they wanted to make that last stint relatively short, because they wanted him on the medium, and it wasn't going to last forever, even with a light fuel load. So that's why they had him doing that 20 lap. Lance Stroll, 20 laps. Nico Hülkenberg, 19 laps. Fernando Alonso, interesting, 19 laps. He retired with collapsed floor. Pierre Gasly 18, Lando Norris 17. So now you're getting into sort of, okay, that's just about acceptable. Carlos Sainz 17, Sergio Perez 17, Yuki Tsunoda 17. Max Verstappen 16 laps. Now I said in the video yesterday that I felt that was mainly due to, he probably worked the mediums quite hard in all the passing he had to do. And in addition to that, with the brake problem as it was, the brake balance control and everything that he's having to live with, getting on a new set of tyres was also going to be very important at that stage of the race for him, to have that grip. But I'm now adding to that, and I'll come back now to me, I'm now adding to those comments, is that not homework by Red Bull? That they are very aware of the problems you can have with the wear rate on the skid pads on full tanks. So you run that stint as short as you can possibly run it without obviously compromising your overall race. And I think that's what they were doing. I think they knew that there was a potential issue, and to run that stint as long as possible, because towards the end of that stint, the tyres inevitably are going to be going off. And when the tyres are going off, and you've still got a relatively heavy load of fuel, that is when you're going to do the most damage to the skid pads on the back of the car, because the car's going to be moving a bit more. You're still going to be very high speed change of direction. Car's going to be moving more, and it's going to be doing more damage, potentially. So that is the time, that is what you want to eliminate. So if you look at that, let's just go back to that list again. Is it any surprise that of the cars measured, Charles Leclerc 23, Lewis Hamilton 20. You know, only Daniel Ricciardo did more laps on his first stint than Lewis Hamilton. So to me, you know, that's not coincidence. That is reality. And look at where Max Verstappen is, 16 laps. You know, and I think that that just comes under the heading yet again of A, great preparation by Red Bull, and B, Mercedes and Ferrari. I suppose you could, you know, if you wanted to be kind, you could say in all the drama of trying to close the gap to Red Bull and the upgrades coming and trying to get the car as good as they can possibly get it so that we can have a really great 2024. I suppose in all of that, you know, you could argue, well, you know, tiny details like how long the first stint should be run should be dictated in Austin in this sprint weekend by the importance of ensuring that you have no problems with ride height. That's more important than anything. Maybe that got overlooked. Shouldn't have done, because there are enough people there behind the scenes and there are enough individual little components of the team to look at that. I mean, it almost comes under heading of strategy, I think. But, you know, to me, those numbers are pretty stark in terms of how short Max's first stint was. And a lot of people have said, well, how many other cars were probably illegal as well? Well, I think we can look at that and you can probably say, well, you know, it'd be really interesting to see what the results would be if they'd measured Daniel Ricciardo's. I would suspect he would have been out as well. I'm only guessing. We know Fernando Alonso's floor completely collapsed, so he wasn't even in it. Probably what I've just been talking about. Lance Stroll, not measured, but, you know, I mean, he was quite quick at the end of the race, so you've got to assume that maybe he was running pretty low. And so it goes on, you know. Pierre Gasly, who knows? I mean, maybe or maybe not. That car would have passed. I don't know. Obviously, Lando did. So that sort of 18, 17 lap mark, you're looking at, you know, just about the safe area. But I think there's another point here, isn't there? And that is that if you really wanted to be blunt about it, you could say that Mercedes, let's take Ferrari out of it because they were really slow in other ways as well. But Mercedes had a quick car all weekend and were quick in both the sprint and the race. And you could say, well, Mercedes were only good, partly because they were running a good strategy. I mean, the medium tyre at the end was good, but partly also because they were running lower than they should have been. And that's why they had the grip. And if you're McLaren now, you're probably thinking poetic justice because, you know, there's no way we could compete with that unless we played around with our ride heights as well, and then it would have been a different race for us. That's maybe what they're thinking. You know, the big question is how much difference did all of this make? And that's a really difficult question to answer, of course, and I'm not sure any expert out there could really answer that because there are so many factors involved. But what you can say is that a rule is a rule, and here is the rule, just in case we want to be pedantic about it. The thickness of the plank assembly measured normal to the lowest surface must be 10 millimeters, plus or minus 2 millimeters, and must be uniform when new. So there's a margin there of 2 millimeters. A minimum thickness of 9 millimeters will be accepted due to wear. So there's 1 millimeter of plus or minus 0.2 if you're not bringing wear into account, or using that in your argument. If you're bringing wear into account, you're allowed 1 millimeter. So there is a margin there. And so if you're an engineer, what are you engineering to? You're measuring to 9 millimeters or to 10. You know, that's the point. And I think that I gotta say, I mean, Red Bull never seem to have anything like the same drama at the back of the car that they normally have. They seem to be running pretty high at the rear this weekend. And that's presumably because they had not only that 1 millimeter of margin, but also they were probably giving themselves another 2 or 3 as well, given the nature of the weekend, the difficulty in anticipating what the bumps were going to be like in Austin in advance, and how the track was going to evolve anyway. And that's what it looks like from the outside, and and the evidence all points to that. So, yeah, I mean, if you throw in Fernando also having that floor problem, and doing the number of laps he did, it's starting to look like just lack of, what's the word, preparation, homework, I don't know. It's all due, of course, to this business of the sprint weekend. And I'm sure many of you out there are saying, well, get rid of the sprints. It's just ridiculous, this business of the car going into Parc Fermé as soon as it does. I'm And I kind of agree with that, because you could argue that the car, you're running a different car in the Sprint and the Grand Prix, definitely, in terms of fuel load and weather conditions that may change, all that stuff. And we are the pinnacle of motorsport. So why bring in this arbitrary limit, which is Friday after the first session, and which you can no longer touch the car? I mean, one of the great things about Formula One is that the teams are very good at innovating, even trackside, and thinking on their feet, when all that's kind of taken away. And I don't like that. I've never really liked the whole concept of the sprint thing anyway, because I just like it to be a Grand Prix. But you're talking to a guy or listening to a guy who, when he watches a sports event, whether it be the Rugby World Cup, the cricket, golf, whatever, I don't want to see replays of last year's final. Thank you very much. I just want to keep everything nice and calm, and then I want to go into the race or the event that we're watching. I don't need all that build-up stuff, and I don't need a sprint race before a Grand Prix in order to keep me happy. And anyway, just on that, the whole weekend, I mean, the sprint race shootout happens, whatever it is, 4.5 hours or something before the race, and it's just an empty slot there, really, I think, and I'm not sure that format is a very comfortable one for me anyway. So that was everything that I wanted to say, I think, about this and this thing, and there was no way they weren't going to be excluded, because that is in the regulations. That is the penalty. And if you're 0.1 millimeter over the allowed margin, doesn't really make any difference if it's 0.1 or 5, you're over, you're out, and that's it. And they've got to have that. You've got to have that, particularly with Valtteri Bottas saying, I wish we could have run lower. And that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem they all face. What's the problem they face in trying to have an argument as to why they shouldn't be disqualified? But I think that neither Ferrari nor Mercedes are even going down that path. They're just saying, oh, well, we got confused by the whole sprint thing, and that was it. Yeah, Charles Leclerc, going back to Charles Leclerc, there is a very good question, actually, I think. I'm not going to be able to get through all of your questions, sadly, tonight, because this is an impromptu one, and I haven't got a massive amount of time. I've got a lot of other stuff on, but I just wanted to do this. But this is a question which I'll put on straight away, because I think it's very relevant to to that race, and it's something that it really drove me mad yesterday, seeing Charles in that situation, and I just don't know what Ferrari were thinking, really. Why is it, says Magnetic Overdrive, only Leclerc that gets the awful strategies? Well, it's a good question, isn't it? Because it was a pretty good strategy for Carlos Sainz. I did say in the live stream before Austin that I felt Carlos wouldn't be out of bed in Austin and would be pretty near Leclerc, and he was pretty much so. Charles, I think, had the edge, as he was always going to things like the change of direction S's, but Carlos wasn't that far away, as I pointed out a couple of times in the videos. And as I said, as far as I know, and I know some people at Ferrari, they decided two-stop strategy for both cars. The only question was whether they'd finish on the medium or finish on the hard. And that was sort of up in the air as they went into the race. But then halfway through the first stint, they decided to put Charles on this one-stop strategy. I can only assume it was because he was going backwards and wasn't going very well. And they just thought, well, we might as well throw the dice and try something else. But in his in his post-race comments, Charles said, in our simulations, the one-stop and the two-stop were very, very close, which is a bit of a surprise, bearing in mind we didn't see Ferrari doing any proper runs on the hard tyre on Friday. We saw Mercedes and Red Bull doing some decent long runs on the hard tyre, but not Ferrari. They were always running with light fuel and not really and the track obviously hadn't even evolved by then. So on what simulation were they basing these decisions? Because they hadn't actually done any homework anyway on the hard tyre. So I didn't understand that at all. And yet they put Charles in this situation where he just did, well, what did he do? 33 laps. 33 laps on the hard tyre, which wasn't very good around there anyway, as it turned out. So it was terrible. And that all happened halfway through the first stint. Again, you got to say, you imagine that sort of knee-jerk thinking in the wrong direction would have gone by now, given the stewardship of Freddie Vasseur, because he's very disciplined and organised in the way he thinks, and yet that it isn't reflected, is it? I mean, it's it's a mess there. That was a mess. I noticed Leclerc wasn't at the track over the weekend, so I wonder whether that was significant as well. Maybe they were just kind of a bit lost. I don't know, but it was, yeah, not good, and as I say, for Carlos to be elevated to P3 as a result of Charles being disqualified, but Carlos did 17 laps, and Leclerc 23 on that first stint. So yeah, I imagine Carlos's floor was okay had it been measured, but it wasn't, obviously. So we just don't know. What a mess the whole thing was, really, except for Red Bull. But they had that brake drama as well. The more detail on that is that Max was saying after the race that it was like an uncontrollable brake balance thing, which adds up to basically not having the retardation when you want it, which comes under the heading of what I was describing in the video of how he was going to drive a race, win a Grand Prix under pressure, and not make mistakes under braking, even if he was not confident of what the pedal was going to be giving him. And he did that beautifully, mainly in sector 3, as I say, by just making sure he was braking in a straight line and keeping everything very calm, and not putting any load or lateral load against braking load into the corner as he normally would. And he did that beautifully. Really, really good. So there we go. Here's a question from M.A. Khan, who was first in the queue, I got to say, before we went live. Thank you very much indeed for that. Where are we here? Let's get it in here. Get through a few questions here. And Mexico this weekend, can you believe it? And then Austin will feel like a distant memory. Disqualified? Were they disqualified? Don't remember that. I'm sure they will remember it, but so here we go. M.A. Khan, hi Peter. Lewis had a major lock-up which lost him 2 seconds and destroyed his tyres. He also said he missed his mark in the pits, losing another second. Could he have won the race without these errors? Well, Max's second stop was over 3 seconds, wasn't it? So that kind of evened that out. Yeah, I don't think he would have won it without that lock-up. I think... I think the answer to that. I mean, it's one thing to be even closer to Max than he was, maybe with 2 or 3 laps to go. It's still another thing to get past Max, bearing in mind that Max was doing sort of 299 without DRS and 321 when he had DRS, and Lewis in DRS was not in that area. He was, let's just have a look, yeah, he was sort of a good 7-8 kilometers slower in top speed. So I think Max, they would have given Max a little bit of extra power as well, I think, if they got that close. I don't think Lewis would have got him. And it's, that lock-up, yeah, but I don't think it was enough to have made the difference, the winning. I mean, obviously the Mercedes pit work wasn't great for either stop for Lewis, which was not good. But also Max was really good, particularly in his first stop. He's really good on his outlap on cold tyres. He did a 59.8 or something, and everybody else was over 2 minutes on their outlap, and that didn't take into account the pit stop in that time. So he was unbelievably good on cold tyres. And I think that's another area where Max has been very good for a long time now. Not that Lewis wasn't either, but Max the car was handling really well, the Red Bull. And you heard Lewis saying towards the end of that long stint, I'm all over the place here. I'm really struggling. And, maybe that was the floor starting to go. Who knows at that point as well. And so you got to assume that the medium wouldn't have lasted that long anyway in that stint. I think they were just about at the edge of where that medium tyre was for Lewis. So, yeah, I mean, maybe without that lockup, maybe he might have had it. But the Red Bull's top speed advantage was so significant over the Mercedes, not over the Ferrari or the McLaren, that I think Max would still have had it. Long answer, but it's only because I've been thinking about the question, and it was a good question. Thank you very much, M.A. Khan. Lucas Noxio is the next one. So just bear with me while I get the question up on screen. It's always a little bit of a drama doing this. Kind of getting used to it now. It's a bit annoying having to do all this line shortening business, or squaring them up, as it were. But there's no solution to it that I've ever come across. Okay, Lucas Noxio says, hey Peter, do you think it's possible Mercedes is falling into the same trap as last year? Strong weekends in Austin and Interlagos, probably, with them thinking they got it and then under-delivering. Well, as I said, I think, not only Mercedes, but McLaren, anybody trying to chase. I mean, look how Aston Martin have lost their way. I mean, the minute they started to go quite well, they started to stumble and fall. And there are so many balls you have to juggle when you're really under pressure and starting to go well, that inevitably you make mistakes. And I think the mistake here, for me, quite clearly, was Mercedes and Ferrari did not think through the effect of the sprint, the bumps, and the ride height rules, and leave a big enough margin, whereas Red Bull did. Now, Red Bull did, you could argue, because everything's very calm at Red Bull. They've won the championships. They've got a great racing car. They've got a great racing driver in there, and they can just think about those details. But every team has squads of people working on those details as well. And I'm trying to think what remit that is, in terms of deciding what the margin should be on ride height. Is it the senior race performance engineer? Yes, it probably is. But to my mind, that also comes under the heading, as I said earlier, of strategy and how long to run that first stint, bearing in mind the importance of respecting the ride height situation. And that clearly isn't happening. So maybe there's too much division between the various subcommittees at Mercedes and Ferrari, whereas at Red Bull, they all tend to mix in together a bit more. Or of course, they all have their own responsibilities, but perhaps they all there's somebody there, whether it be Adrian Christian, Jonathan Wheatley, whoever it is getting the best from all the brains and putting it all together and diluting that information and coming up with the right answer, time after time after time. So, yeah, I think that's it's just the pressure of trying to do all these things at once, and Mercedes massively under pressure anyway with the two great drivers they've got. Are they going to win a Grand Prix this year? All this stuff. It's a difficult, very difficult. All of their own making, of course, but it's a difficult time for them. Eric Bent Velzen. Eric Bent Velzen said, could Max have been 30 seconds faster if he'd had no brake problems? Don't know about 30, but I get where you're coming from. Okay, I mean, Joe Spiker, I'll just put this up in case somebody's joined the feed a little bit late, just because it will mean reiterating a point that we've just gone through. And that is, well, I'll put the question up and you'll see what I'm on about. Right, here we go. Kind of missed that. The first part about Mercedes, Ferrari dropping the ball, we've answered already. It's just the pressure of trying to cover all those details. And you saw it not only with the ride height thing, but you saw it in that snap decision suddenly to put Charles on a one-stop strategy. Joe Spiker, F8. Hi Peter, do you think Mercedes and Ferrari are dropping the ball more and more? Okay, I've kind of spoken about that. What do you think of not checking the sister cars? It would have helped Checo massively. Well, that's, as I said, the rule in Formula One is that they check one car from the four top teams, select one car from the four top teams. So that was obviously Lando because Oscar didn't finish. They chose Charles Leclerc from Ferrari. They chose presumably Max and Lewis. So they're your four top teams. What do I think about that? Well, I mean, everybody wants instant results. They don't want to have a podium and then find that the guy in the middle of the podium was disqualified 3 hours later after the race. Everybody's agreed that's bad for the sport. We've got to have all this instant stuff. And one of the things under that heading is don't make the Parc Fermé too long and start templating the ride height of every car that finishes the race, and all the fuel capacities and oil capacities, because it's going to take far too long. Let's just check the weights of all the cars. That's the most critical, obvious thing, and then we'll do this selection process. So that's where Formula One is. I doubt they're going to change that based on Austin, because how would they do it? You know, it would take so long to do that, and they wouldn't be able to publish the results, and there'd be a million things going on. So it is what it is, and it's going to stay that way, I think. And Checo, for all, you know, for wanting to finish well, he is a racer, I think, you know, and I've never been critical of that aspect of Sergio Perez. And I think, you know, with Mexico coming, he wouldn't want that. I think it's quite good that he had that bit of a kick in Austin, and he'd probably go quite well in Mexico, I suspect. I'm sure the Red Bull will fly there. So, you know, he's going to be in a rocket ship of a car, and he probably won't beat Max, but you never know. Something might happen with Max, or Max might not qualify well, whatever it is, and Checo might be in front. You know, what would happen if Max beats Perez in Mexico after the race? I mean, will there be a riot? I don't know. We'll wait and see. I'm sure some Formula One people have been running for cover, that's for sure. That was a joke, by the way. Of course they went right. Mexican crowds, incredibly well behaved, as we've seen since 1970, when they were all over the track, clapping the drivers as they went past, completely oblivious to any safety issues that may have been involved. Yeah, I love the Mexican Grand Prix. So where are we now? Back to the YouTube studio. And Joe Spiker, I won't put this up because it's the same viewer. He says, Joe Spiker, what do you think of Toto shouting at everybody that if something dangerous would happen with low ride heights, he would come after them, and then his team gets caught breaching the rule he wanted? Well, I've kind of mentioned that already. You know, that's another difficult thing, isn't it? You know, all the other stuff that's been going on at Mercedes, and the problems they've had, and, you know, sponsors that collapse when the CEO gets arrested. And I'm not being unkind here. I'm just saying it's been a really tough time for Mercedes recently, if you want to look at the reality of it rather than all the puff pieces. And yeah, you know, Mercedes were pretty vociferous, weren't they, about the whole ride height thing. And here they are, a victim of it. So yeah, I think they've taken it on the chin, to be honest. I don't know how Lewis has taken it. I think from Lewis's point of view, he's probably thinking, you know, it's not my problem. I didn't do it. Everybody knows what I did. I drove that race. I enjoyed myself very much. I'm back to being where I want to be. The car's a little bit better, and or getting better, I suppose, is what he's thinking. And so I'm going to shrug it off and not think about it. You know, whether I actually got the points for finishing second or didn't, it's kind of irrelevant to my year. I know I finished second. I was on the podium and I drove well. That's probably what he's thinking, I would imagine. Master Mouthful. Hi, Peter. Greetings from Morocco. When is Formula One coming back to Africa? Well, my good friend Dieter Renken he's a South African, very good journalist over the years. He's now working with the FIA, working for the FIA president, as far as I can make out. And he would know best about that. I think if there's any chance of South Africa coming back into the calendar, now's the time over the next couple of years. Let's hope it does. I used to love that race very much. The old Kyalami, the new Kyalami, Johannesburg, the whole thing was wonderful. Testing it. Kyalami over the winter, then going down to Cape Town for a bit of a laugh, playing some tennis and golf. Brilliant. Love the whole thing. Bring it back, please. Agree with you 100%. So here's one. This is about Checo. I suppose there's a lot of interest in Checo now with the whole Mexican Grand Prix thing happening. Where are we? Sorry, I have to go back to here now. This is where I get a bit confused. Here we are. So, just move it a little bit. We get it nice and symmetrical. There we go. Thaisa in Winyand, Casa 3 Polopos. Hi, Peter. Checo is probably safe if he finishes second this year. He's safe in the keeping his drive, I think what you mean. But won't Red Bull be worried for the constructors' title once other teams start to catch up? Well, you know, the tone of your question is that he's unbelievably slow and won't be able to pull his weight in terms of scoring the points he should score if Max is still winning races. And I don't think that's the case. I think he is still about the best guy you can have in that other car. Sorry, I think there are probably 5 or 6 guys you can have in that other car, but I think he's as good as those 5 or 6 out there. And maybe Daniel Ricciardo would be a better teammate now that he's realizes what his lot in life is, I suppose. But you don't, as I keep saying, I've said a million times, in my opinion, if you've got a Max in that team and he's grown organically with all the people there and he knows the team inside out and he is as good as he is, you don't want to compromise that by putting in somebody who's going to be a bit annoying to Max. And you know, and I know exactly what that means. It's what George Russell is to Lewis Hamilton. It's what Oscar Piastri is to Lando Norris. Those 2 guys, George and Oscar, are a bit too quick for the balance of the team to remain in harmony. Now, I know a lot of people think, oh, well, you want the 2 quickest drivers you can get for the constructors' points. Well, is that really true? There have been a few instances when the constructors' title has been won by a team that didn't win the drivers' championship, but it's not many. I mean, generally speaking, if you were at Red Bull right now, if I was in Christian Horner's chair, I'd be thinking, if I've got a team next year and we can produce a car good enough for Max Verstappen to win the drivers' championship, regardless of who I got in the second car, there's a pretty good chance we're going to win the constructors' championship. That's what I'd be thinking. And I wouldn't have the constructors' championship thoughts in any way change the way I would approach winning the drivers' championship. So as much as the teams and the public love to say, oh, the constructors' championship is so important with the money and the status and everything else, actually the drivers' championship, in my opinion, for any racer out there, and there are a lot of racers still running race teams, the drivers' championship is the one that is the most important, and the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. If you win the drivers' championship, the rest of it takes care of itself. 86, okay, 86, Alan Prost won the drivers' championship and Williams won the constructors' championship. But that was why? That was really because of that tyre failure on the last race. I mean, Nigel had P3 in the bag, tyre blew, that was it. So I don't, and look who was in the other car of the other McLaren at the time, Keke Rosberg, who wasn't exactly in his best year. He wasn't good in that McLaren. He was sort of Sergio Perez level at Red Bull, if you like, and struggling with understeer in that car. And yet McLaren won the Constructors' Championship due to the consistency of Alan Prost. And, won the Drivers' Championship, the consistency of Alan Prost. So it's, I think you don't want to play around with it. You've got Max Verstappen, keep Checo Perez in the other car would be my thing. I mean, you could put Liam Lawson in there. I don't think that would be an issue for Max. I think he'd accept Liam Lawson because he's learning so much and he wouldn't in any way destabilise it. But if you put somebody like Leclerc in there or George Russell or even Lando, I think it would destabilise the very, very nice package that they have. So there we go. That's that one. Where are we? YouTube. Back to YouTube. Here we go. Sorry. Okay. This pin thing keeps coming up now. Sorry, taking a while to do this because it's a bit glitchy tonight for some reason. Funny how things suddenly are glitchy and sometimes they're not, isn't it, with electronics? You just give up after a while and just accept it for what it is. Here we go. David B. Did Max sound whingy on the radio comms regarding being updated with information from his team and he, a driver, approaching bends in the road? I think he did, didn't he? He sounded pretty stressed throughout the race. I mean, the main point was being spoken to on the radio whilst he was focusing on this, trying to manage the brakes and what he was doing, which was kind of not what he normally does in the braking area. And he was really having to focus on it, and he did it very, very well. And I suppose he found it very distracting then suddenly to have the radio message coming in at that moment, because he made the point, every time you speak to me, I'm under braking. And which is kind of strange, isn't it? Because they've got the GPS. They would know, it's a long straight there. You would know when to speak to Max and when not to. And maybe there was a delay or a lag in the GPS or something. I don't know. So maybe that was the problem. But I know I mean, Nigel used to hate it when we spoke to him on the radio, unless he was flat out on the straight and he was sort of in a slightly relaxed mode. He never ever wanted to have the radio coming in. Other drivers seem to be able to, I mean, Lewis seems to be able to talk from any point of the circuit, doesn't he? And Lando always seems to be, yeah, car's okay, yeah, not bad, yeah, right. Well, it's not. Actually, it's kind of funny, isn't it? Lando's got into this thing now of, how's the balance, Lando? Well, you know, it's okay. It's all right. Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, I can live with it, yeah. And he's never, yeah, car's good. It's getting to be very good, that. Well, Oscar's brilliant. Oscar just has to say, he comes on the radio and he clicks the radio and he just says, yeah, that's it. And you know exactly what he means. I love it. A bit like Carlos Reutemann, audio version of Carlos Reutemann, because you'd say to Carlos, so Carlos, did you have understeer? You had understeer, Carlos, terrible understeer, but what was the car like in terms of traction? He would, and you knew immediately what he meant. Yeah, traction was pretty good, except that I had to be very careful with the way I used the throttle, or something, you know. You got all the information just from the expressions. Carlos, what do you think about Piquet on the pole at Monaco? What do you think about Keke? Very nice watch. Very nice watch. I think it was a Cartier he had, Keke, from memory, in those days. Yeah, anyway, Oscar's turning into one of those on the radio. Oscar, any adjustments you need to make in the pit stop? Yeah. Okay, copy. Love it. Right, next one. So we've done that one. Nasa Shimano. Wow, this looks like a fairly dramatic confession. What's that? Let's have a look. Here we go. Nasa Shimano. Again, okay, he's replying there, isn't he? But let's put it up anyway. I, being a Checo and Red Bull fan, have also thought of this. Placing my loyalty aside, I think that Checo is now shown to be a liability to the team for next year. Well, that's a bit tough, isn't it? The guy finished, what did he finish, 4th or something? In Austin? He's won some races this year. Come on, give him a break. He's not supposed to be anything other than Max's number 2 anyway. What do you want? There's half a chance he'll win Mexico. And, he might go quite well in Brazil, I suppose. So, speaking of which, Pirelli Compounds, Brazil. The next race, as you know, is Mexico. So there you go. They're the Pirelli compounds. These are significant only to see whether that hard compound that we had in Qatar and Japan and Zandvoort and Silverstone and Spain is coming back into play. Because when that comes back into play, we know McLaren are going to be brilliant. So that's not happening in Mexico. In fact, we're going the other direction in Mexico from Texas. We're going to the softest of the range, and then Brazil back to the Austin spec. So, yeah, McLaren won't be as. I mean, McLaren were really good with it. I mean, Lando drove really well from the front row and led and all that stuff, and looked fabulous. But Was it the floor? Well, it'd be interesting to see. And it's a difficult thing, isn't it? With all these teams talking about the upgrades and they're working. I mean, Haas had a big upgrade. Alfa Romeo had an upgrade again. Mercedes had an upgrade. McLaren obviously working on their car. Ferrari for sure. But it's a difficult time of the year actually to be verifying and using these upgrades, because Austin was a sprint race, so that's not much testing you can do there, and then there's all the compromise you needed for the bumps anyway if you were in Alfa Romeo's garage. Then you got the thin air of the altitude of Mexico, which kind of isn't the perfect test situation for aero upgrades, you could argue. Yes, everything's relevant, but in terms of data against what you have, a little bit more difficult and complicated. Brazil, sprint race, so that's difficult. Vegas is a brand new street circuit, so that's not exactly the place to bring in to verify and try out new upgrades as well. So not an easy time to be bringing in all these upgrades now that Red Bull are relaxing and they've taken their eye off the ball. Yeah, right. And the World Championships are won. So yeah, a difficult time. So here's another one. Back to OBS. Here we go. This is about Max, brake issues, brilliant overtakes. Okay, this is from Aditya Burley. Is it down to Max's sheer talent that despite nursing the brake issues, he pulled off 2 brilliant overtakes and turned 12 from so far back without locking up or going wide? Many would have faltered. Yeah, that those overtakes at the end of the straight, I think that's turn 12, isn't it? It's more the DRS and the momentum he has that puts him in the position where he's alongside. The other guy at this moment can do nothing. And at that point, Max isn't then braking as late as he can possibly brake and leaning on the car as much as he can. He's braking in a straight line, as we saw, and he's just getting the car stopped with stability. The pass was due to the DRS and the momentum he had in the slipstream of the other car. So it wasn't like they were dead even and then he just braked later and got the position. It looked great on TV, and I'm not in any way detracting from his driving and how few mistakes he made. Well, zero really, as far as I could see. But he had one lockup, I think, into the hairpin. But no, that was Lando, wasn't it? No, I don't think we saw Max even locking up. And I think that was all due to the way he just changed the way he drove the car, how he braked, and yeah, he was using the top speed of the inherent native top speed of the Red Bull with its DRS open, brilliant combination, and getting the momentum before the braking area, if you like. So, then you would then move to the left and take Max out at your peril. There was no way that was going to happen. So yeah, it was well observed, but I think in reality that wasn't so much the braking. It was just how good the Red Bull is in that department. There was, that was the corner coming out of there. Of course, he had that slight moment with was it with Leclerc? I think it was. Yeah, when he had that moment with Leclerc, and he was kind of off the track, wasn't he, to sort of get the inside for the next right-hander. And I was slightly nervous that we were going to see some sort of thing coming up saying under investigation or something, but there was nothing mentioned about it. And Charles, who's normally quite vociferous about these things, didn't mention it either. So that went away. I'm pleased it did, because it was a standard early lap pass as far as I was concerned. Good to see James Hinchcliffe doing the interviews after the race. I really rate James, Canadian IndyCar driver. Good to see him, there. I thought he did a very good job as well. Spoke well and can hear, it was everything was logical, and he asked some good questions, I thought. What am I doing here? YouTube, here we go. No, OBS, sorry. It's been a long weekend. It's still going to be a long weekend, isn't it? In terms of the time change from Europe to Mexico and putting videos out, and and then we've had golf last weekend, the Andalusia Masters, which was fabulous. Congratulations to Adrian Maronk winning that. And then we got the Legends, what they call it, or Masters Golf Legends, I think probably is, this weekend at La Manga. It's good. Ian Woosnam, Jose Maria Latabal. Elliot Davidson, hi Peter, if Formula One had one wildcard event per year for the drivers count towards the championship, or just for a special prize, which track and cars would you pick? Macau in Formula 3 cars, short corner t-shirts. Yeah, I would pick that actually. Macau in Formula 3, absolutely. I know Max would love that. Lewis would love it. Lando would. Yeah, and those Formula 3 cars, not FIA Formula 3 cars, Euro Formula, what are they called now? I don't know, Freck or something. Regional, Formula 3 regional cars. The old Euro Formula 3, proper, nice, nimble Dalaras. That would be fabulous with Macau. You've already taken the answer there. It would have to be Macau, wouldn't it? Such a shame we don't have... Macau isn't the same as it used to be, really. It's a bit watered down now. Nothing like as good as it used to be. But it was in the days of great days of Formula 3, proper Formula 3, Barry Bland and everything else. It was amazing. Loved it. What a weekend that was. Just had so many laughs there. And I've done 2 races at Macau. I'm so pleased I did that. All right, that was that one. Thank you very much. Good question. Good point, really. Wasn't a question. I just agreed with you. So Prince Lev Mishkin. Here we go. Getting this one right now. So that goes, and then this comes, and that's okay. And this is a very good question. I did mention at the start of the show, but I think it's worthy of repeating, because he says, hi Peter, how many other cars you think would have failed the same test as Lewis and Charles? If 50% of a small sample size fails a regulatory test, shouldn't the entire field be tested? Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And the point is, this rule of testing one car from the top 4 has been in Formula One for many, many years, and it's because they don't want to they want to save time. It'd take forever to do every car. So I suppose they could do a slightly larger sample, I guess. But that's the rule, and that's what they did. And for in my opinion, if you want to look at who else would have been in trouble, look at the length of the first stints. And because there you see both Charles and Lewis ran very long first stints when there was heavy fuel in the car. And that's when they could have done a lot of damage. 23 laps for Leclerc, 20 for Hamilton. So I suspect Daniel Ricciardo, also on a one-stop strategy, would also have had trouble, as would Lance Stroll, as would Nico Hülkenberg. And we know Fernando Alonso did have trouble. He's floor collapsed. So, yeah, I think quite a lot of anyone below 18 probably, or below 19, marginal, probably would have got away with it. But above that, I think you're playing with fire. You seem to be playing with fire. That's the evidence of, of ride heights, even with the margins that you're allowed to play with, which is 1 millimeter. So yeah, thank you very much. Good question. What's going on now? It's all collapsed. We have a lot of questions. I'm not going to be able to get through all these. So sorry. I'm working out how to do that. I'm going to the last question. That's all. Jamie Adrianzi says, bring back grass and gravel so we never have to listen to a single track limit argument ever again. Thank you, FIA. A sincere Formula One fan. Well, that means taking off the circuits that also run MotoGP, though, I guess, doesn't it? I don't think Liberty would want to do that, because they need as many circuits as they can, so they can have as many races as they can, so that everybody can make as much money as they can. So I think that is the problem. Ray says, yeah, likes Hinch on post interviews. Good to hear that. So who is Mick Schumacher? Somebody's saying. Funny question. So this is from Boom Shanker Boom. Thank you, Boom Shanka Boom. Why do I always find it so difficult to find OBS these days? Where is it? There it is. So many windows open. I know you're not supposed to. I've got all these windows open. Almost need some fresh air. Good evening, Peter. Thanks for bringing in all the great analysis. Thank you very much for that nice comment. If Hamilton's car was legal, would he have finished P2? Well, you know, it's a speculative thing, isn't it? You know, as I say, if you were McLaren, if you were Lando right now, you'd be thinking, well, you know, if I was running Lewis's ride heights, I probably could have run the medium last stint as well and could have easily finished second, maybe won the race. It's probably what he's thinking. Equally, if you're Lewis and Mercedes, you're probably thinking, nah, it didn't make any difference at all. I was the moral P2 finisher, and so I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I think the damage was probably done in that first stint, as I've said, because he ran a very long first stint, as did Charles Leclerc. And if that's the case, they were obviously running pretty low, relatively low, within, I don't know how many millimeters of where they should have been, and how much difference that makes to the aero of the car is specific to the Mercedes, specific to the Ferrari, and specific to the McLaren. So very difficult to make comparisons like that, or to know how much slower, if at all, Lewis would have been had he been running whatever it was, 2 millimeters higher on the rear ride height. How can you possibly? We can't do that. I'm sure Mercedes would know, and you've got to say it would have been slower, otherwise they would have done it, I guess, wouldn't you? So I hope my audio hasn't been going off. The mic slipped a little bit, I see. So I hope that, you know, that's as much as I can say about that, really. I don't think I think everybody could give an opinion about that, but I can't imagine that anybody could actually be cut and dried about that unless you're actually in the team. And you're not going to give that information away, are you? Obviously. Ricardo Robinson. That's an interesting one, I think. Where are we here? Why does Lando never seem to fight with Verstappen, but with Lewis it's a different matter? The move he pulled off when Lewis overtook him was ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I suppose deep down inside, Lando has this, probably thinks, you know, Max is this incredible guy that seems impossible to beat. And I suppose he does always treat Max with quite a lot of respect. I guess with Lewis, he's thinking, you know, I'm one of the young British new superstars, and Lewis is one of the older British superstars, and I'm not afraid to race with this guy. I think it's more that, probably. But I think in general, Lando's pretty good, isn't he, in terms of racecraft and ethics on the track. Yeah, if I think somebody asked me, what do you think about Lando's racecraft and how he drives with other cars? I'd say generally he's very, very good. I suppose with Lewis, you know, he's not afraid to be pretty aggressive and maybe, in your opinion, do something a bit ridiculous. But I think with Max, it seems as if Max has a bit of an aura about him if you're a driver like Lando, and that may change, obviously, as time goes on. But it's a good point. Well observed, I think. Very good. Alan C says they should put Mick Schumacher into the Red Bull. That will also get the American fans behind Red Bull even more, because they love a family with history in sport. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people may say, who cares? But I think you make a good point there. And America is very important, and I'm sure in America there's sort of reverence for the whole Michael Schumacher thing, and Mick being the son, probably he gets a lot of respect, and just as the Andretti family have, and the Answers over the years as well. So Mick into the Red Bull. I mean, I think he did quite a good job. I mean, whether he'd do a better job than Sergio Perez, I don't know. I mean, would he win races the way Perez has won Monaco's and Baku's? I'm not convinced that he would. I think Perez, don't forget, Perez is not that bad. Yes, he has his off days, but he's not that bad. I'm not saying that Mick is either, but I'm not sure you'd replace Perez with Mick as such, because I just don't see why they would do that myself. But I like Mick a lot, and I've got a lot of time for him, and I'd love to see him get another opportunity. But at the moment, I don't really see how that's gonna happen. Musa Mungani says Hulkenberg needs new wheels. I'm sure he could do something amazing in an Aston or a Merc. Yeah, well, he's not going to get an Aston, is he, so long as Fernando's around? And I can't imagine they'd hire him anyway if Fernando wasn't around, because they always like Lance to have a world champion to beat or try to beat. And he was not far away in Austin for the first time in, I don't know, 6 months, not too bad. But from the pit lane as well. But Hulkenberg wouldn't fit that bill, would he? So, yeah, I like Hulkenberg. He's done a good job in the Haas, very good job. I mean, he's got his drive next year, isn't he? So that's all right. Hinch, another one, invest and rest. Hinch should be a full-time addition to the Formula One broadcast team. There you go. James Hinchcliffe, if you are watching, you've got many fans already. Should teammates have... Okay, let's have a look at this question. This is an interesting one, I think. I think it's his. I can't quite work it out yet. Let me just get it up on screen. Robin Bissett, Peter, should teammates of disqualified drivers demand a check of their own car? No, I think they try to change the subject completely and hope that the scrutineers don't come anywhere near them on the basis that they've already checked the teammate's car. So don't come near mine, please. So, yeah, I mean, let's have a look at, I mean, that might have, if they'd checked Sainz's car 17 laps, he probably would have been okay. Perez did 17, so, you know, he and Max 17 and 16. There's a story there, isn't it? Neither of them did long stints. So it doesn't really apply to any of the people who might have had floor damage, I don't think. If you take from Gasly upwards, really, I don't think anyone below that would have had serious issues in scrutineering. So, yeah, but... it's a difficult one. It's very difficult when people get disqualified. It's not a nice thing, is it? Especially for a racing driver. It's not his fault, you know. Swan says, either way, thanks, Peter. Thanks for all your effort and dedication. Much appreciated. What effort and dedication? I'm just having fun with you guys. I love it. But anyway, I appreciate what you say. Thank you very much. So, a bit of talk about Nico Rosberg for some reason. Jamie Adrians, I think it's a good one. Let's have a look at this. I think it is. And then we might have to wind it up pretty soon after that. This is about Oscar Piastri. Can we get it all in there? Yeah, just. It's over my logo. Not much we can do about that. Tough. Jamie Addressy. I truly believe that Piastri, when given a good car, is the next big star battling with Max. He impressed so much in his rookie year, as Max did at Toro Rosso. Yeah. You know, I'd agree with that. I think he's right up there. But did you? I don't know how many people caught it, but did you see? Because I don't think the director did on the world feed. And I was talking to my mate Corey Pesatoro about this. And but did you see? He had that shunt with Ocon, which was really Ocon's fault as far as I could see. It certainly wasn't Oscar's fault. He was way ahead. And but then he had this massive bash, but then he just kept going, and then he tries to pass Max on the outside going into the S's on that opening lap, having had that shunt. Wow! I mean, just amazing. And they never showed a replay of that, but you just catch it if you watch it closely, and that's just classic Oscar Piastri, isn't it? Totally brilliant. And yeah, afterwards he was very sort of laid back. Oh well, it could have been a better weekend. I could have done a better job. And I thought he was outstanding in that first lap, and it's such a shame that shunt happened, really, because I think he could have had a very good race. Yeah, he is good. He's really good. I mean, Zach's got him there. He's got a problem because there's no way Lando's at his best, I think. I mean, Austin, he was at his best, but he was always going to be on a circuit like Austin. But if you put a circuit like Suzuka in front of them, or anywhere where you can really see an Oscar at work, where you can really appreciate what he does with short corners, that's when it really is going to cramp, and has been cramping Lando's style. And there's enough sort of line lock, fast and impressive corners and undulation changes in Austin for Lando to be really good there. Difficult to beat, let's phrase it that way. But that isn't necessarily the case. I think the next circuit where that might be the case could well be Brazil. Depends on the weather, but I mean, we haven't really seen Oscar yet, have we? In the wet. And it could be wet in Brazil. We've seen him in the wet, but we haven't seen him the current Oscar, more confident, understands the team a bit more, the car, and how well he could really go. He was really good in the wet. Actually, he was quickest in the wet, wasn't he, in Saturday morning in Melbourne. I don't know how many people were watching that, but the track, it started to rain halfway through FP3. I think it was Saturday morning. Anyway, it was when it started to rain, and Oscar went out, and he was about 7 other cars were there, and he was quickest straight away. So but let's hope it does rain in Brazil in a way. Be really good. So thank you. Yeah, he's very good. Daniel Chalino, do you think the Saudis will buy Aston Martin? I think Lawrence Stroll, the father, has probably got an exit strategy already, hasn't he? I mean, the way it's going, I can't imagine he's going to want to be doing what he does, spending that money or putting all that money together to run this thing if his son isn't part of it. He's doing it for Lance, so he's got an exit strategy, and the most logical place to go is Aramco, the Saudis, I guess. The whole Live Golf thing. Do you see how much Taylor Gooch? Have you ever heard of Taylor Gooch? I'm sure you haven't. He was a sort of journeyman PGA golf pro, and then got hired by the Live Tour. And as far as I know, last weekend he won something like 17 million. Just because he happened to win the Live tournament last weekend. Just unbelievable. I mean, the money that sport washing thing, I mean, we have it. We just kind of have to accept it in Formula One, I suppose. But I know Lewis does a very good job, I think, within the realms of what he can do as a Mercedes Formula One team employee. I think he does a good job of trying to show where we could go in that area. I don't want to get involved in politics. I better not. But I'm sure Aramco / the Saudis are high on the list of potential buyers for Aston Martin. So there we go. So this is an interesting one. I think it sounds very informed and interesting. I'm not sure I'll be capable of answering the question because it's quite. I tell you what, one of the issues is that I have is. I've got to make this a bit smaller. Sorry. How do I do that here? It looks a bit untidy, doesn't it? Like everything to be tidy. My son's like that now with his golf bag. Every club has to be exactly leaning the right way. They have to be in exactly the right order. The putter has to be at exactly the right angle with the cover on it all the time. It's good. Attention to detail. Blake Barone, have you ever seen an era where a car could be on C3 tyres with a fat fuel load and look slow, and then be on C3s with low fuel and look lightning quick. This era is confounding. Now, I'm going to have to confess here, I don't know what C3 tyres are because I never really understand all that stuff. I just call them the hardest in the range, the medium and the soft, isn't it? But what is the C3? Is the... I'm quite sure I understand it even now. The C3, depending on where you are, let's say we're in USA, the C3 was the medium, but in Qatar it was the soft, and in Mexico it's the hard, whatever that means. So what are we talking about here? Are we talking about the Mercedes, I guess, is not very good on full tanks generally and very good on light fuel. I think the problem is that this era is, it's a ground effect era. And whereas in the previous ground effect era, most of the teams at some point got their skirts to work and found the true rewards of ground effect and understood that the key was to get the skirts to work. And eventually most people got them half reasonable and then the skirts were banned. In this era, as I can see it without skirts obviously, nobody really understands how to have a perfect aero package that embraces all the different types of circuits on which they race, doesn't create bouncing at all, and still allows the car to be very quick in a straight line. And nobody, apart from Red Bull, nobody's managed to do that. That is what's so odd about this era. And we've all got our own explanations. Mine is that Adrian's been around long enough to have learnt from mistakes in the past, and he's a very, very good aerodynamicist anyway, and his team therefore is as well. And other teams like Mercedes, like McLaren, McLaren obviously getting better, but and they're all getting better, but like Mercedes and McLaren over the last couple of years have had sort of dedicated committees designing various aspects, and nobody's had an overall grasp of the real issues. Like the real issue of Austin was what ride heights are we going to run based on it being a sprint weekend. We're in Parc Fermé after unofficial practice on Friday. We don't really know how bumpy the track is till we get there, and we've got draconian ride height rules. Of any circuit in the world that's going to be a problem, it's going to be Austin this weekend. Focusing on that, which is obviously what Red Bull focused on, they focused on eliminating the bouncing and maximising the aero efficiency of the car from day one. Whereas most of the teams didn't focus on eliminating the bouncing because they never thought it would happen. And so they've been trying to catch up ever since. And that's what's going on with this regulation. And because they don't have skirts, which would make it much easier to control the air, it's a very, very complicated aero package, which I'm not sure is a good thing, because for the general public, it's very difficult. Do they really care how many strakes there are on a car, how many fins there are, or teeth, or whatever? You know, it's all irrelevant, isn't it? All they want is close racing, I guess. And they're not getting it because the ineptitude, if you like, of all the teams except Red Bull. Sad to say. And occasionally one of the other teams hits a sweet spot and gets it right, but it doesn't happen very often. Somebody's saying here, Enzilganga Wolf says the car was illegal as soon as it was wheeled out of the garage on Sunday race day. Well, of course, that's not strictly true, because even though they were running at ride heights on the Mercedes and the Ferrari that eventually made it illegal when the skid pads were worn away, it wasn't illegal when it went into the race. And had they driven round slowly and not not bottomed out, it would be illegal. It would be legal at the end of the race. It would have been last, of course, but you know, it wasn't illegal when it started the race. Not in the same way that it would be illegal to start a race if you didn't have enough fuel in the car to do the full race distance, for example. So there's a difference there. Alan C says, let's get Danny Ricciardo to Red Bull for 1 year while they sort out a deal for Oscar to Red Bull. Then those two will work and Oscar can then take over a few years from Max. That would be quite ironic, wouldn't it? Oscar decides not to take up the drive with Alpine and races instead for McLaren and basically ends Daniel Ricciardo's Formula One career. And then Daniel goes to Red Bull for 1 year and then replaced by Oscar at Red Bull. Poor old Daniel. So there we go. Anyway. So lots of, what else are we talking about? This is a good question. It's a good one to end on, I think, because this is right up my street, this question. Well, it's a comment, really, but I think it's absolutely right. It says, we all got to see what happened. Well, I'll put it out. NJGRPIR 2007 says, we all got to see what happens when Max is forced to modify his braking and drive like Checo or Sainz with an RB19. You can now understand how much of a difference Max's style makes. I think that's 100% correct, and I hope I did a half reasonable job of explaining that in the video last night after the race, because it's because he has this repertoire and that he can drive this way, and yeah, he can easily do a Lando lap, he can easily do a Carlos Sainz lap, but a Lando and a Carlos can't do a Max lap. That's the difference, and the Max is able to do that, and we saw it in Barcelona as well when he was trying to get temperature in the tyres. Is just one of the reasons he's so good. I think Lewis does it innately, natively, if he's not listening to the radio too much or chatting to the engineers too much and he's just feeling the surface of the road and the car. And I think Charles probably does too, although his head is so full of politics and strategy and all the things that are annoying him that he doesn't get much chance just to drive the racing car anymore these days, sadly. But Max is in this perfect situation of, you know, great car, great team, great people, perfect communication, and when things do go sideways, whether it be crosswind, whether it be the brakes, whether it be tyres degrading, whatever it is, he's able to compensate with his driving, and that is one of the great things about him. Not the only driver in the world ever to have had that amazing talent. Jim Clark obviously was another. I think Jackie Stewart was very good at that as well. Jochen Rindt was not, because he was very much a Ronnie or even a Carlos Sainz, has to drive the way he wants to drive on the rear of the car. But most of the great Grand Prix drivers could move around with what they were doing with the steering, the brakes and the throttle, and it was wonderful to see that in Technicolor in Austin with all that braking stuff going on. So there we are. That was it. That was what I wanted to say really about that. I think the first stints were quite relevant, the length of the stints, and I think the rule that they will take one of the top 4 cars in the race and do the check on those, but do fuel checks on all. I think it's going to stay. I don't imagine that's going to change, and that's why it was what it was. So there we are. I will move now on to Mexico, or we'll all move on to Mexico with these weird time changes that are going on. But Friday, Saturday and Sunday, Mexican Grand Prix. Can Sergio Perez reignite his career and bring off a win in front of his home crowd? Won't be easy. He's got to beat Max Verstappen in a Red Bull RB19, but apart from that, he's got a half reasonable chance. Anyway, we'll see when practice begins on Friday. Thanks to Jetcraft, thanks to Pitbox.io, and thanks to you for watching, for all the great questions, and for your support. See you very soon.